And for more, let's speak to Dr. James Dorsey, Adjunct Senior Fellow from the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies at Nanyang Technological University. Dr. Dorsey, thank you so much for joining us. Let's talk about Mr. Netanyahu's speech first. It has received a lot of criticism, many saying he downplayed the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. What do you read into his remarks to Congress?
It was essentially a hardline speech in which he gave very little ground, whether that's in terms of a resolution of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict through the creation of an independent Palestinian state, whether that's with regard to a ceasefire, or whether that's with regard to the plight of innocent Palestinians in Gaza who are paying the price for the war. Fact of the matter is that he got one standing ovation after the other. And he got that standing ovation both from Republicans, but also by what is still a majority of Democrats, of the Democrats represented in the U.S. Congress, who attended the speech. So essentially, this was about shoring up support and ensuring support and expressing gratitude to the United States for the support the U.S. has given Israel in this war.
It was widely hoped that Mr. Netanyahu would announce a deal to end the war, but he didn't even mention a ceasefire or the ongoing negotiations. Why? What does this say about a potential deal?
Well, I think that despite all the optimism that is being expressed by various parties with regard to a ceasefire deal, we're no closer in terms of a narrowing of the positions between Hamas and Israel. So Hamas wants a permanent ceasefire. It wants an end to the war. And the proposal that was put forward by Israel and President Biden in late May doesn't really guarantee that. Because what that proposal says is we will have a first phase with an exchange of prisoners, hostages for Palestinians incarcerated in Israel. And then we will have negotiations on a permanent ceasefire. And the ceasefire will remain in place after the initial 6 weeks, as long as those negotiations take place. So with other words, either party at any given moment could break the ceasefire by simply pulling out or letting the negotiations fail. On the other hand, what Netanyahu wants is really only the first phase of that proposal, which is a 6-week ceasefire in which a number of hostages, as many as possible, are exchanged for a number of Palestinians and then go back to the war.
So still no ceasefire in sight. During his speech, we saw Mr. Netanyahu praise both President Biden and Donald Trump. What's his possible strategy here, given the U.S. election is just months away?
Well, I think obviously he needs to keep his lines open to both parties, and that's what he's doing, which from his point of view makes absolute sense. He's got a lot of question marks or uncertainties. On the one hand, there's the question mark of, with regard to Kamala Harris, to what degree she may shift an emphasis of policy. She's been, certainly this year, in a number of statements, more empathetic towards the Palestinians or the Gazans, and she has been more emphatic about a ceasefire and the flow of humanitarian aid into Gaza. But on the other hand, Trump is not a given. Obviously, he was very favorable towards Israel in the terms of the policies that he implemented while he was in office, whether that's the recognition of Jerusalem as the unified capital of Israel, whether that was de facto support for Israeli settlement policy or the annexation of the Golan Heights captured from Syria in 1967. But at the end of the day, and this is true for J.D. Vance, his presidential candidate, at the end of the day, what Trump cares about is America first. And if Israel doesn't fit that bill, he very well could walk away from it. So this is really a period of uncertainty and maybe even uncharted ground. Let me add one more complication to this. We have not seen a US response, or for that matter, some European response to the opinion expressed by the International Court of Justice approximately 10 days ago, in which the court said that it viewed Israeli occupation as illegal, occupation of the West Bank as well as Gaza, and wanted to see an Israeli withdrawal from those territories as soon as possible. This isn't an opinion by a court whose rulings are international law and legally binding. And that, of course, puts the United States, as well as other supporters of Israel, in a difficult position.
So Kamala Harris and Donald Trump clearly will have different approaches to Israel. Can we expect, though, that the war in Gaza will be a top election issue for U.S. voters?
I don't think it will be a top election issue. Let's be clear. The United States is divided on this issue. No doubt we saw roughly 50 members of Congress not attend Netanyahu's speech. We saw a large demonstration outside of the Congress while Netanyahu was speaking, and we've seen demonstrations over the course of the war. But there's a very strong segment of the American public and American voters, including the evangelists, who are a significant, I mean, they make up to 100 million people in the United States, who by and large are very supportive of Israel. So what we're seeing is polarization rather than a shift in mood. And one has to look at what segment of the American public we're talking about in terms of who they may or may not support. So I don't think that Gaza is going to be the major election issue, except for in very specific constituencies. Obviously, the Jewish constituency, the Arab constituency, the Muslim constituency, youth. For those segments, and those are important segments, but nonetheless, they are segments. For those segments, of course, Gaza, and then to varying degrees, Gaza will be a determining issue in how people vote.
Thank you for sharing your insights, Dr. James Dorsey, Adjunct Senior Fellow from the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies at Nanyang Technological University.